Are we recording?
Yeah, baby.
Oh, who knew?
ABC, ABR.
Always recording. Always be recording. I like that.
Glengarry Glen Ross. You ever seen that movie?
No.
Yeah, Always Be Closing, ABC.
Is that what that's from?
Uh-huh.
I've heard the phrase before.
It's Alec Baldwin. It's a good movie.
I thought Glen Ross. I thought it was like a murder mystery.
No.
No. Is it like a Wolf on Wall Street type
Kind
thing?
of, yeah. Yeah.
Who else is in
Coffee's for Closers. I don't know. I don't remember. I saw it 20 years ago. So I could be totally wrong about the premise also.
You might be wrong. Could be right.
You never know, bro. Let's have some coffee.
Down the hatch. So we're here at the Deconstruction Zone.
Yeah.
It's you and me.
I'm here and you're here.
But we're missing somebody.
We are.
Who are we missing?
I don't remember her name.
Emily Zell.
That's it. You got it.
Emily Zell.
Yeah.
So Emily.
Yes.
101 Fever.
Oh, I thought you were calling
No,
me
calling you Emily.
Yes.
I think, so we've made it up to this point. This is episode 39.
Mm-hmm.
39 weeks without a sickness. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's first time.
Well, I think we've had sicknesses. I just think we were on the day of recording.
Yeah. Fair enough. So I thought this morning I was like, you know what? Like, there's been a lot of things that we've had hurdles, but this is the first time this happened. Oh, I thought you were.
No, that's what I'm going to do too. That's what I meant.
There it is.
Yeah. I'm always a producer first. How close is that mic to his mouth?
So Dustin, boop. Before we get in,
yeah,
I'm going to ask you a couple questions, rapid fire.
Let's go.
First,
do you want me to be honest or funny?
Honestly, I want you to be funny. See what I did there?
Yeah.
I want you to be honest.
All right.
So you've sat behind the camera for, we'll say, 36 episodes. You've been with us for 4-ish, something like that, 3-ish.
Been on, yeah.
Yeah, you've recorded a lot. You've been in a few. What?
And that's all I do is sit behind the camera.
Yeah.
That's all.
Literally do nothing behind me.
I hit one button,
Pink.
And then I usually just play on my phone.
A lot of Candy Crush.
Yeah.
Do you have like an iPhone game that you're like?
I don't play games. I'm not a game guy.
Really?
No. I love Tetris. Like if I had a Game Boy, I'd play
Tetris.
Tetris. Heck yeah. I don't know if there's a Tetris game on my phone.
Yeah, you could for sure get Tetris.
I don't think it's called Tetris though.
No,
it's probably not licensed.
It's like the Xbox knockoff of Dr. Mario that I have that's called Pill Monster or something like that.
Right. I think those are the wives of Sonoma County. Pill monsters. I don't know.
Okay, so what has been your favorite moment or just thing in general about the podcast so far? Because I feel like you get a unique
the hot wings
perspective. Yeah, hot wings. Okay,
that was your old show, but that was my favorite.
Yeah, the hot wings episode.
No, the one when I ate hot wings with you in your old show.
Oh yeah,
that was fun because I like food. Because I'm chubby. But so on this one, what's my favorite thing? Wow. You know, when I hear people get interviewed on TV and stuff, like famous people who actually have something to say other than me, or not like me, right? I always go like, I wonder if this is just like them. Are they really thinking about, and I'll tell you who's a thinker, and he'll pause forever, and he doesn't care how much airtime costs. Macklemore. White rapper from my hometown of the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. So proud of that guy. But the most interesting, or like what's my favorite thing? I guess getting to know you guys better has been my favorite thing. And not even, I guess I get to know you guys behind the camera, obviously, just like everybody else. But we also get to hang out more. I would say at the beginning of all this, we knew each other pretty well.
Yeah.
But I would say like we're straight up friends. Like we're homies now.
Yeah.
Like, and before, like, I think we were friendly and we were like heavy acquaintances, like a heavy dose of acquaintance creamer.
I like that term. I might use that. You're my heavy acquaintance.
Yeah. But I liked you and I think you liked me, but now I would say we're I see you all the time now. So, which I like, you know,
I think I see you more than most people in my life. I was thinking about that today. Like you and Emily, someone was asking me about this yesterday. I have like a coach that I like meet with for church stuff. And he was talking like, will you guys like hang out like Emily and Dustin and you? And I was like, I mean, we record a lot together, but we also spend like a lot of time together. Like it's not just like we get here, we press record, and then we dip out, right?
Yeah, and I also think one of the things interesting that that it's a seat that I sit in that no one else does is I look at you guys for hours a week too, editing stuff or listen.
Yeah. Yeah. You hear it over and over and over again.
That, and I edit and produce y'all's church podcast. So
sure.
First thing Monday morning, I'm hearing you talk about whatever the sermon is for that week. And so like, it's an interesting thing when you're a content creator, which is what they call it now. It's what young people call it. I would say I'm a photographer and a filmmaker, but when you're making something, if you're shooting a wedding or if you're making a film, documentary or whatever, like the amount of time you spend with that other person, but not really, it's bizarre a little bit, because I've had straight up like in the grocery store be like, "What up, girl?" to like people that were just like bridesmaids in a wedding, and they're looking at me like I've never seen this guy in my life.
Like I've seen you a million times.
Yeah, and I've literally like touched up the pores, zoomed in to your nostrils, you know, and it's weird. It's happened to me a number of times.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's been the most interesting thing. And before we get into the topic for the day, my second question was, what has been the most surprising thing in terms of like maybe something you learned, or like, hey, this podcast has gone a different direction? I know we made the joke, or Emily's made the joke, like Dustin says, I'm not Christian enough for this podcast, right? And so it's like, that could be a surprise. But what have you learned the most? What has been the most surprising, the biggest shift? Like, what's that been for you?
You know, I think it's been interesting. Well, I've been very surprised that there's been a full deconstruction of Emily's faith. Like Emily, like from where she was. There's no shade or anything. It's just like she was in.
None of us
place.
saw it going that direction.
No. I mean, and I felt like that shift was a quick left, you know, or right.
Sure.
Like that happened pretty quickly in my opinion. And I was like, whoa, like full on, you're not a Christian anymore. And and that's from her own mouth, right? Like that to me was like, what happened? That really surprised me. Like, not that you could get there, just how quickly it happened. I mean, week one, it was very much like, this is who I was in a denomination. Now I'm with another place that's more free feeling.
Sure.
And then that was not even 39 weeks ago. I mean, or whatever.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And then bada boom, bada bing, this thing that she's been 22 years all about it. That's what the cool kids say. Yeah, about it, route it. Yeah. You probably didn't know that.
Not even a year in though. That's interesting.
Yeah, and then that shift. So that really did surprise me.
That's interesting.
The other thing that surprises me, I think, a lot is her maturity for her age. I think she's very mature. Yeah. And then also the way that you've been able to walk alongside of her as her friend first, and sort of maybe a pastor second. I mean, we use that as like it's a pastor and a comedian.
Sure.
But we kind of do that kind of just because it's interesting. It's
funny.
And you're not really showing up all the time as a pastor. I'm not saying that in a shady way, and like that's not shade. That's just like,
I don't come in with like, here's my like
agenda
to like try to lead you down the path of righteousness, right? Yeah, I get that. Yeah, it is interesting to think about that, because it's been like, I think all of us, Emily included, if she was sitting here and didn't have 101-degree fever, she'd probably say the same thing, right?
Yeah.
That day one of recording was a very different vibe than week 39. And I think like this is something we joked about. I think she might have said this on the last episode, was like people would DM like, hey, I just started, like I really read, and it's like, hang on, right? Yeah. And it's like the shift, and again, there's no shame in it, but like I think even she wouldn't have projected the rapidness of it. And like we all know, like becoming friends and spending time together, there's like other things in life happening around us that catalyze things and make them faster or slower or whatever, right? But it's been interesting to like, I wouldn't have guessed, not even a full calendar year in, that the podcast would have taken on, and not in a bad way. Like I prefer where we're at right now in some ways, but I wouldn't have guessed.
Well, that's because you want her to go to hell. And that's how we're different.
That's how we're different.
Yeah. I think so. Like, I know, like we've both been divorced. We've talked about that.
Uh-huh.
And if you want to watch, if you want to hear more about that, you can go to behind the scenes
behind the zone
on the Patreon and pay this guy a few shekels, and you can listen to that.
But not just pay. This is something that's like I think we should let everyone know.
Well, it's also Emily.
It goes back to the podcast, the church, the podcast, this whole part of kind of the Wells.
I don't know how that
outreach
works.
And whatnot. So anything that people subscribe, give,
just drop my phone.
all goes back into. We don't make money off this.
Yeah. Well, no, but we will when we're rich and famous. I do have an idea for a spinoff. Are we touching knees?
We're touching knees a little bit. What's the spinoff before you go further?
I can't even think right now.
Because our knees are
I'm riled up. Yeah, so what if we did a whole other podcast? Like you know how like the superheroes do metaverses and stuff?
Sure.
So we do a whole nother podcast where Emily gets saved again. Wait, hear me out. She gets saved again, and we go through the whole thing, and she starts speaking in tongues. She's doing whatever, right? And we get after it. Then at the end of each episode, we tell them it's a choose your own adventure. So I say, if you want Emily to meet Jesus again and be slain in the spirit, go to episode 4. If you want Emily to, throw all 22 years of her life out the window and become an atheist, go to episode 7.
That'd be a wild, the amount of effort it would take to record. We'd have to record for a year and then release it all.
That's true. But it'd be interesting.
It'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can act, though. Like, can you guys act? Because that's what it would take.
No, I'm not an actor. Not an actor at all. So, well, thank you for humoring me for a few questions, but yeah. I want to get into my thought for the day. So there's a group called the Harbor Collective that I lead, which is kind of inclusive pastors, lay people, church members from across the country that are like, hey, I didn't know people like you existed. So we Zoom twice a month, and then do kind of other things, whatever. Just had a Zoom, and this woman named Rachel was talking about her deconstruction journey.
Wait, people are saying that they didn't know that people like who existed.
Just like inclusive Christians, like the idea that like I could. Some of them are like,
you mean blasphemers?
Blasphemers.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't know that women could be pastors. I didn't know LGBTQ people could be included fully in the church.
Do they not live in America where you could just do whatever you want?
These people do live in America.
Okay, that's weird.
So this person, her name's Rachel. She was talking. She's like, her and her husband, like, we've been deconstructing for decades, and like you and I have said,
you're really not very good at it.
Well, you and I have been like, we've found this term. It was
right, yeah,
a postmodernism, 15 years ago.
And then it was the Reformation before that.
Yeah. But she was like, she used a really interesting analogy that I had not really, at least conceptualized. Maybe I thought about it, but she's like, I would deconstruct God out of this box, right? And it was beautiful. And then like I just realized that I deconstructed into a bigger box, and then I would deconstruct out of that box. And it was like the box just kept getting bigger and bigger, right? But it's like God was always put in this box. And I thought about it like, those like little Russian toy dolls, right? Yeah. Like you take out and it's like, oh, there's still something in here, right? It's like good. And it made me think about this idea that like the totality of deconstruction might never be surrendering the box, right? Like the idea is like our construct and our framework always has something to say about it, right? And so like for someone like Emily, and I wish she was here, we should have called her in. We could have done that. We knew how to do that.
The visual wouldn't have been as cool.
I actually thought about Easter egg replacing
just superimposing her face, put a green screen right there.
But what do you think about that idea? Like this, like if we're always deconstructing, like have we ever fully deconstructed out of the box, or like are we always having some box that we're putting God in? Yeah,
I mean, we're human beings are experiential vessels. I mean, we grew up in pretty similar areas, but we still have different stories. You had experiences that were your experiences. So we're putting things in boxes, right, and writing stories in our heads, not even on purpose. It's subconscious, and so I don't see how, and I don't even know that that's bad to put things in boxes and compartmentalize things. I mean, I think it can be. I think it can be bad and detrimental and hurtful to people. But I also think I'm a very compartmentalized person. I mean, the way that I even like schedule things on my calendar and
you block out
everything. Yeah, I block out time with my kids, like just because that's valuable time to me, and I don't want something else to encroach. I'm like, this is what I'm going to do at this time, and So no, I don't think that it's possible to fully, there's not perfect deconstruction. It doesn't exist because nothing's perfect. I mean, we're going to throw a little bit of the schmear on it from that experience or that church that we went to or that relationship that we had. We're going to toss a little bit of this, something over here that we heard or learned, or I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that we learn. Even, there's Christians teaching that there's pastors that say, hey, God helps those who help themselves.
Yeah, right.
It's not in the Bible. It's not even the concept is not in the Bible.
The phrase or the concept is not in the Bible.
It's very, very opposite of that.
Yeah.
God helps those who can't help themselves. But this is a thing in our culture that's been told to us since we were little kids. And there's, whether or not, there's full-on groups of Christians that believe that Jesus descended into hell and got the keys to hell in his 3 days.
Yeah.
And then there's some people that say, well, that didn't happen. Like, where do you see that in the scriptures? And then you see people that are hardcore, like, you're going to go to hell if you are inclusive to people. But I see a Jesus who was very inclusive to people.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of being inclusive to everybody and then letting the Holy Spirit sort it out, because that ain't my job.
Yeah, you're not the Holy Spirit, right? So I can think of, like, for myself, and this, because I appreciate what you said. Like, I'm paraphrasing a little bit. Like, we put our own story onto the story, right? So
it's a layer, right?
And so, like, I think about, and I probably said this before, but like, I am an includer, and I remember my good friend in high school who was my good friend. It was a guy, we like grew up together, but now a transgendered woman. But in both of these parts of the story, like, I remember as my friend who was just another boy like me, like, was ostracized for being kind of nerdy, kind of alternative. And I was like, I wanted to include this person.
Sure.
Fast forward, like, I'm a little more involved in the church. We're in our late 20s or early 20s, getting out of college. And all of my Christians turn my back on this friend as they come out as transgendered, right? And I'm like, that just can't be a part of God's story. And so I've reflected since that, like, I'm in my mid-30s now, and reflected on this idea. It's like, is my own desire for people I love to be included shading how I interpret the gospel, right? And I think
it's interesting.
And I think it is. And so I just wonder, and you could talk about mine for a second too if you want, but like, I was going to say, like, do you have some, like, a catalytic life experience? 'Cause I think that's one thing that we don't always give enough credence to, is like this catalytic moment in my life that maybe coincided with my understanding of the gospel, of God, of Jesus, all of that. And it's informed how I lived my life, right?
Yeah, I have a similar middle school story. I was in middle school and I was friends with a kid that lived up the street, so it was a proximity thing. You're always friends with the kids that live nearby because they're the closest kids you can play with. I think I was the first kid, even though we were mad poor. I think I was the first kid to get a Nintendo when they came out. And so, it was the first time kids came to my house. I was always going to their houses, Yeah. And this kid, I'm not going to say his name. He definitely doesn't listen to this, but he's a Mason now. I know that. But he was probably in the smarter kid spectrum. Kids thought he was nerdy. He was very, very smart and got good grades and was straight-laced. And but I was friends with him, and I was like a skateboarder, and I was friends with other, like, that sort of alternative kid group. And there was a kid that I was friends with, really close friends with, that one day did the 2 for flinching thing. Do you remember that? Yeah. When you flex on someone and then they flinch, you 2 for flinching. Well, this kid roundhouse kicked the other kid in the face, and he had braces, and he just, like, blood. He just, like, you saw he's just, eyes got big, and he just didn't know. The guy that got kicked was like, what just happened? We were in PE, and he just walked through the door, and it was just a gym thing, and the kid was just showing off. And I saw red, man. Like, they were both my friends, but I went nuts, and I then was a fight and things happened. But, and I never made up with that kid. Like me and that kid were enemies through high school.
Okay.
I couldn't stand him. I wanted to fight him all the time because I hated what he did to that kid. And my reaction wasn't cool either. But I don't have, rejection from the faith community, story, but I think that when I look at the person of Jesus and I read about the life of Jesus, it couldn't be more clear how we're supposed to treat people. I mean, the most important commandment, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, we know the lawyer's like, who's your neighbor? He's like, whoever. Like
Whoever's around you, right?
Everybody is your neighbor if you see them. And so that Jesus who, told Zacchaeus to come down and he was going to have dinner at his house, and, the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector,
that one.
I mean, it's like, oh, thank God I'm not like you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lord, that I'm not like that lowly person. And then that guy, the tax collector's like, just thank you for letting me even be here. Like,
yeah,
thank you for letting me, be in your synagogue. And, those are all the things that I go, man, like, how arrogant is it of us human beings to decide down here who is and who is not okay for heaven.
Yeah.
When that's not our job.
Yeah.
I feel like the helper's job is very clear.
And by that, I mean the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. The Holy Ghost.
Yeah. Just for any of our Bible fans.
Yes. So that's a Christianese thing. But in the Bible, Jesus says, I'm going to send a helper.
Yeah.
And so the helper is supposed to do what? Help.
Yeah.
And what does that help? I mean, is it helping guide us I don't know. I don't know all the things, but I know that I believe that it's not my job to carry a pitchfork and a torch and a sign telling you all the things you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's much more effective to be a reflection of who I believe Jesus was and is, and that is light in dark places. And so to pile on to somebody who is transgendered or LGBTQ or queer, whatever it is, to pile onto that person pain of any kind.
Yeah. Or say you're out, right? Like,
does not say to me, this is what Jesus would do. No, Jesus kicked it with all of the outcasts. If you're not a church person, okay, Jesus was a rabbi. Rabbis had to go through rabbinical school, and they would be cut year after year. Mm-hmm. So, kindergarten, did you make the cut? Okay, cool.
Right.
First grade, second grade. I don't know what the grades were, but they would get up through graduation, and then you're a rabbi, you're a teacher of the religious, the other people. So you were allowed to teach in synagogue.
You're the best of the best, right?
The elite, man. This is like Ivy League, and most people didn't make it. And other rabbis had disciples that would listen to their teachings. This is how they interpret the Torah, and then they would, follow them because they felt like that interpretation was the correct interpretation. So they would follow those rabbis. But they were always graduates, or at least continuing on. Not Jesus. Jesus is like, let me find the dirtbags. Let me find the losers. Let me find the kids that got flunked out in first grade because they didn't bring a pencil or couldn't write their name.
Yeah.
And they're out on their boats with their dad, or they're doing whatever they're doing. I mean, everyone hated tax collectors. He's going after them. He's hanging out with women that were known prostitutes. Not hanging out in a sexual way, but like,
but a group of people that were as marginalized as you could have been in a world that didn't have high views of sexuality or women. Right.
I've been writing a book for 10 years called Mohawk Jesus. And it's just about how I like my story, and it'll never get published, but like, it's just something that like I have to do. I feel like, and it's just the idea that Jesus would be hanging out, somehow Jesus would be hanging out in strip clubs. He'd be hanging out with heroin addicts. He would be hanging out with Trump supporters. He would be hanging out with liberals. He would be hanging out with people that are on the farthest reach that we all think are dirtbags.
Yeah. And regardless of where you sit, if you think they're a dirtbag, Jesus would have been like, I'm probably going to hang out with you.
Well, collective dirtbags too. I mean, all of the Jews did not like the other Jews that were tax collectors. I mean, that was collective.
Yeah, there was a collective hatred.
But I also think, you go ahead. Sorry.
No, I love all of what you said. Just as this popped in my mind as you're talking, and I think we could link it in the episode. But like a great video to watch is, and I don't link Numa videos. Do you remember Numa videos?
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever watched Dust?
Yeah, I've watched them all many times because they helped me get my film start. Like that's what made me want to make films.
So Dust is a Rob Bell video. They're called Numa videos. I think Numa is the website has been taken down, but if you Google Rob Bell Numa Dust, you can find it.
Nooma.
Yeah, Nooma. Rob Bell Dust, and essentially unpacks that even further. This idea that like his whole story is like you walk so close to your rabbi, you're covered in the dust of your rabbi, right?
Yeah.
And like but talks about going through the 3 different levels of rabbinical school, and like all of Jesus' 12 didn't make it through step 1, right? Like they weren't not the best of the best. Right. They were the worst of the worst.
That's right.
And I love that. And then my favorite passage currently, like you go through phases, right? You have your life verse or your whatever, but the Pharisee and the tax collector, I'm geeking out on right now, like for the last couple of years, in the sense that like the tax collector in there has no pretense. He has no level of like, I'm we all want to be good, right? Like I'm good. He's not talking about how good he is. He's not talking about what he's done. He's not talking about anything. And there's no clue to say he ever comes back and repents for his sins or gets any better.
The tax collector.
The tax collector, that he never comes back and gets any better. We don't know that he does.
Right. And we don't know. We know he's a tax collector. That's all we need to know in reference to his standing. Yeah. So when he came into that synagogue to pray or to do whatever he was there to do, he was catching like evil eyes.
Yeah. Well, you think about like that, and that's another rabbit trail. But you think about the people that like, when we're church people, right? Like, and I've tried to create an inclusive community at the Well. It's like no one should feel any sort of way about coming in. You should feel welcome. Mm-hmm. But think about that one guy or gal that's come in at some point in your life. Like there's someone.
Sure.
Like for a group of our congregation, like if you were a Trump supporter and you came in, they'd be like, what is this guy doing here? And we have Trump supporters. They wear MAGA stuff and they're welcomed. And I love that. We have people that are like, if I saw a Biden person come in, I'd be like, screw this guy, right? Mm-hmm. We have probably people that feel some sort of way about LGBTQ people, right? Mm-hmm. And people of color and women in leadership. Like you could probably make it. But what I've appreciated about our church is it's like we've made this our mantra, like your seat at the table shouldn't cost anyone else's seat at the table. Like inclusion doesn't just mean inclusion of one group, it's inclusion of all people. And I love what you said earlier, like let's let the helper, let's let the Holy Spirit, like the advocate, do the work. We're creating a place that it's like we want people to come together. But, and we're not perfect, so don't hear me say that. But I would say, like, I think it's interesting that it's like that we're really into homogeneous communities of people that think, look, talk, and believe like we do. But it's harder to create somewhere where it's like any level of tension of like, because think of how uncomfortable it would be if like you walked in like to a church and whatever your mortal enemy was, you saw them there. It, like you don't feel comfortable anymore. But like,
no,
is that a part of what we're?
Well, and here's one of the things that I think is interesting is that there isn't. I'd love to see you guys do a thing where there's a roundtable discussion.
Sure.
And you have people who are trans, people who are LGBTQ, and then people who have a lot of questions, like that are still just trying to figure it out. Because I think that there's a lot of people, and I'm in this category, that
you're at figuring it out.
I'm not like I'm fully woke, you know. Yeah. I'm not going to try to pretend like if I go around the corner at the grocery store and I see a 6'4" trans woman that I don't go, like it's not. I'm not making fun or throwing shade or being disrespectful.
Sure.
It's still shocking to me sometimes.
Okay. Yeah.
And I will say that there's been plenty of times where I don't know what the goal is of a trans woman, right? Like, is it Kim Kardashian attractiveness or whatever? But I've seen absolutely, you could not tell. I don't even know right now if I'm allowed to say these things. Yeah. So this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Is that like, you know my heart.
I know your heart.
And I have I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I don't want to
you're at the core of you, one of the most inclusive people I know. So,
but thank you. But I also still have feelings that happen inside of my dome and in my heart.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to understand better, but I also am just so constantly afraid that I'll say the wrong thing or make a mistake. And there's no safe place for that.
Yeah. Well, why don't you try it on a podcast?
Yeah. Hold on a second. Let's
let the dogs go by.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I will say this. So I'm I don't know, this will come out after this message, but
yeah, I like to do my things big where they just broadcast to
I like
people. Then they just hate me.
So I'm prepping for my sermon that'll come out. It'll have already come out by the time this happens, but it's about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and like I kind of make this argument, like Jesus gives us the most beautiful picture of vulnerability, of what God desires of us, kind of in 3 levels, right? So he's vulnerable with the disciples, and I don't know if you know the story or not, and our listeners maybe don't know the story.
Oh, I know the story, bro.
So Jesus, like, he goes into the garden, right? He takes the 12 with him, but he takes 3, Peter, James, and John, a little further with him, right? And they go into the garden, and he's like, essentially gives them like, hey, don't fall asleep.
Right. He gives them one rule.
One rule, but I'm going to go pray. Spoiler alert, they fall asleep. Immediately. But he goes in, and Jesus is like, hey, like, Abba, Father, like God, Daddy, Father, like if there's any other way for this to be fulfilled, like I'm talking like not me, someone else, a different plan, let this cup pass, right? Like give me any other way. But what does he end it with? If not my will, let your will be done, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's an amazing story, right? So it's like he's really vulnerable with his disciples. He's like, I'm going to bring everyone with me, but I'm going to bring a few real support people a little further. I tell them exactly what I want. I don't ask them for feedback. I'm just like, this is who I am. This is what I think, right? Don't fall asleep. Be with me. Support me. They let him down, but at least he's honest, right?
Yeah.
He's really honest with God, right? He's like, I don't want this to happen. We never talk about Jesus in that way. And he's like, if there's any way, please. But then he
already knows there's no other way.
And he already knows. But then he's honest with himself in that. He's like, but it's not my choice. Right. Like, I trust you. I believe you. It's your God's sovereignty, God's plan, not my own. And I love this idea. And this is maybe bad Christology. But like, I see Jesus trying at least to put on the garments of selfishness for a second. Be like,
sure,
not my will.
Well,
not my will, but like, if there's any other way. But then he's like, but it's not my will.
Yeah, but it is his will. This is the whole mind-boggling situation, right? Because he is God. But then you're like, okay, what I see in that is his humanity.
Yeah,
like
it gives us the picture.
He's afraid. I mean, the Bible says that he
sweats blood.
That he sweat blood, and you know, I've even looked at the research of that, and scientists explain how it works.
Yeah, there's a way to sweat. Like, you can get so stressed out.
It's a level of, you know, nowadays we go, I got a paper cut and I stubbed my toe on the same day. I have trauma. I need to go see the therapist, right? He was so worked up, he sweat blood.
Sweat blood.
I pooped my pants at a Chipotle once, but that's not the same thing.
You know, I've thought about telling my pants pooping story on this podcast. I won't today, but maybe that'll be a Behind the Zones episode.
That'd be good. I'll tell my story too.
All right, I like that.
I'm going to use it in my comedy when we're at it's one of my
at
stories.
Mount Union.
Yeah,
but I do. So to go back to that, like, I think there's this really cool level of like God is vulnerable with God's friends, God's own self. Like, if the way you want to look at the whole Trinitarian aspect of it. But when I think about like you being like, am I going to get canceled for saying like X, Y, or Z thing? It's like, we've lost the ability, and this all ties into deconstruction. If Emily was here, like, she'd be a part. Like, I think that's what makes this conversation so enticing and provocative. Is like, there's no place right now in Christian culture to just be like, I think this is all bullshit, or I don't fully understand this, or
but see,
whatever.
Even that though, this is all BS. Like, I think that I agree with you. There's not a place for it, but I would say to that person, hold on a second. Can you rephrase that so that, because you can think that, right? But like, can you rephrase it so that the people that are sitting around the table that don't feel that way don't feel attacked? Because I think right off the bat, like, I agree. I'd like there to be a place where there could be more openness. It seems like Trump supporters, and you know, they have no problems. Like, we're not going to be woke and we're going to talk about the things. And I agree with some of the things that they say, and I disagree with a lot of things they say, both sides, you know, of the coin. But it's super hard unless you know people's hearts, like where they're coming from. Do they have an agenda? Are they trying to
Well, I think it goes back to even what you said almost 5 minutes into this, after we got kind of through the opening stuff. Like, we're friends.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that's what we're missing in this world. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
we're not
benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and we're not creating like great friendships with people. And my ex-wife and I too, we're not great friends. One of the things that we say in our assume best intent, right? So we don't have great friends that we trust, that we can have real conversation with. But with non-friends, I don't think we always assume best intent. And it's like, how do we create those?
Yeah,
those spaces?
We've been hurt, so we put up the wall. You know, Trump supporters pull out the 6-shooters. You know, it's whatever it is, right? Like, you know, that makes it. And here's my problem, and this is just me personally, but I try to be funny by shocking people.
Yeah,
and that's part of my
You're
personality.
a shock jock.
And I know that I'm not really a jock. I don't really work out.
Mm-hmm. Jockey
again. No, I couldn't sit on a horse. I might be the horse. So, you know, that's the thing where we don't have, like, I want to be shocking, and I used to be really good at it and funny, you know, right. And now you can't do that anymore because it's not okay.
It's not funny anymore.
It's still funny. I don't care who you are. It's still funny, except for when it's at the expense of someone else. And here's the problem. Even if they're in the room, of course, then you're just a jerk. But if they're not in the room, you could still be changing someone's opinion of a certain group of people.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you don't know how people look up to you. You don't know how people, what they're listening and how they view you.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how to do this in a weird way or not weird way, but for anyone watching on YouTube, they've known for the last 15 minutes that I've had to go pee.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're 38 minutes in.
So I got to go pee. So I think this is the only time to end this episode.
I love it, man.
I love it.
Hey, here's what I want you to do. I want you to use the restroom. And when you're on your way up the stairs, embrace the journey. You see how I did that?
I like that.